the reason for estimation, there's a number of reasons. As you said, I think a lot of the time the development team's asked to estimate, and other than the obvious, it's not very clear to them what the reasons are behind doing that and why it's a good process to follow. So the main reason, the most obvious, I would say, is to set up a budget and a time frame to form a basis for commercial discussions. That's, what the client or the sponsor gets out of it, I guess. But I feel like it gives value to all of the stakeholders on the project. So for the devs, it gives you a chance to work through problems, identify challenges early on in the process before you've started development. And for PMs as well, you can kind of identify pitfalls earlier on, gives you a foundation to plan sprints on, so time box periods that culminate in a valuable feature, and lets you do things like forecasting velocity after the fact.
So basically, you should not always provide estimate just because we are asked for. You should always ask for the why we are asked to do it. And as you said, there are too many purposes for it. So the Scrum Master can ask for it when he has to organize the sprint planning, because he knows the capacity of the sprint, so want to spread out the work during the sprint. The client obviously is asking the estimate because is going to decide if to apply that budget for the specific project, on how to work the scope for it, and obviously is creating as well estimation confidence into the team. So the guys know their technical skills and they're going to work out better with providing an estimate. But there are as well, I think, different methods of estimate. Now, guys, obviously, we are working to different sectors as well. Dick is working currently on the health sector, and as you said before, there are different ways of estimation in there. I worked as well in my previous experience with a different way, and always changing the way depending on the project we are on, the client and the team as well. Do you want to share with us, guys, any kind of method that you use it in your current experience or previous experience, or you would like to use, for example, in the future you never tried before?
Yeah, so I guess there's kind of two broad categories that you can put the estimation in. So there's this kind of estimation that comes at the beginning of a project and the discovery phase. And there's kind of the more granular estimation that takes place while the project's running, so in the delivery. I think, as I said, there's kind of time and complexity based. And I think time based tends to happen at the beginning more than it does in the delivery phase, because that can kind of cause its own problems, as we'll get into later. As for complexity based estimation, so rather than just splitting things down into days, half days, we do things like story points, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, which is where you essentially replace the time measurement on an estimate with a point, and you assign everything points, like we were saying earlier in the Fibonacci sequence or something like that. We've also used t-shirt sizing, which kind of offers another level of abstraction away from story points, where you put the features or stories into small, medium, large, extra large buckets, which lets you kind of measure how complex tasks are going to be without assigning it a time factor. Jake, I know you've used a couple of other ones as well that you mentioned.
Well, I know that there are other methods of estimation out there. So there's something called dot voting, where as a team you have so many dots to spend, and you put the dots against a story, and the more dots means the more complex it is. And then there's another one which is large, uncertain, small, where the idea behind that is you get through the large and the small ones as fast as possible, and you put the stories into those buckets, the ones where you're really sure, and then anything that you're uncertain of, you put into the uncertain bucket, and then at the end you come back around and spend more time going through those until you decide whether they are small or large. And these are all sort of mostly ways of abstracting time away from the estimates and focusing more on how complex a feature or story is.
Yeah, well, planning poker is one of my favorite one in this. Obviously now is a bit. I was going to say that one. Planning poker is another way of estimation, and you basically base it on scorecard, and then there are as well, the Scrum Master got a kind of bunch of cards as well that can propose during the refinement session to use in order to facilitate the session. And for example, obviously now it's a bit difficult to play planning poker, but as Jake also recommended me, there are a lot of remote tools to facilitate the session even remotely. So you know that now we are all working from home, but this didn't stop us to deliver projects, and all our session obviously have been run remotely as well. Patrick said that he was involved in a lot of discovery phase, one of them run remotely. I don't think that was an impediment providing estimate during the session too. So what we can recommend you is indeed to continue to, if you are in a project that requires estimates or you want to provide estimates for your project, to continue to do it even if remotely. I don't see it as an impediment because there are too many tools on the internet that can help you to facilitate the session. All right, so basically we saw what is estimation, we uncovered its purpose, and we know the reason why we are going to estimate. So it's important basically for for specific project, team, or a specific context basically. So now that we know this and we know why we are going to provide estimates, why we think that people are still challenging the value of estimation, why there are still this bit of misconception around it. Who want to answer? Jay, do you know why?
Well, I know there are probably different reasons depending on the type of person you ask, whether it's a developer, stakeholder, scrum master, client, and depending on whether it's discovery-based or delivery-based estimates. But to sort of attach on to what you were saying earlier around the estimates that you provide during the discovery phase, one of the things you could say about estimation is it is a guess to some degree, and in discovery you're at the point in time where you know the least about the project and about the things you're going to deliver. But what then happens is you use those estimates to come up with a budget, and that just seems a bit strange, but it is what typically we see happen. So I think that's a bit strange, a bit odd. And then other sort of challenges in the value of estimates is, if it's a developer, for example, and they come up with an estimate, it could potentially look like a deadline, or if the client's there or a stakeholder, they might see that as like a maximum in their head, and then that can potentially put pressure on the team if that's the sort of environment that it is. So, of course, you can always, there's always ways and means of managing those things, but these are things that can happen.
That's a really good reason to use methods that are abstracted a little away from time as well, so that you're not tying people down to kind of miniature deadlines in that way.
Yeah. Of course, some people will probably want to derive a time from that, and there are ways of doing that as well, which we'll probably cover. Now, in terms of no estimates, or should I say, some of the people with the in the camp that maybe estimates don't provide value, is a camp which is the no estimates camp, and their train of thought is their argument for the reason why they don't want to do estimates is because they're inefficient, inaccurate, and they cost both time and money. And they believe there is an alternative way where actually, if they don't spend all that time doing the estimates, because let's be honest, they can take a long time to do. So, if you've got the full team involved in estimating stories, and maybe you take 10 minutes per story and you've got so many stories to do, that's quite a big chunk of time. So it's time and money that it costs to do that. So if you can if there was some way of getting rid of that, which is what they believe they can do, then that would give you more time to focus on delivery.
So do you guys agree with what you say, that there is no estimation camp that actually is saying that estimates is a waste of time? So do you agree that indeed we need time to estimate whenever we have to provide an accurate one that is actually driving a decision, an important decision? Now, at the same time, I think that, to be honest, even if it will require time, it will anyway improve communication within the team, because otherwise you'll never come up with the time is needed for providing an estimate, because otherwise you'll never come up with some unexpected risk that you're going to find when you're properly going through the implementation of a specific piece of functionality. What do you guys think?
I think if you don't spend that time kind of going through the features in detail and drilling down into the work earlier on in that estimation process, then you'll just find that time's moved forward, and it's going to have to happen anyway at some point in later ceremonies, like in sprint planning or backlog refinement. That's going to happen. You'll have to go through the tickets anyway in detail. So I feel like replacing estimation with a different method that might be quicker but not go into as much detail just kind of kicks the problem down the road, rather than getting rid of that extra time spent.
You could argue that you're actually if you're spending time doing the other ceremonies like sprint planning or backlog refinement, that you're actually then doing it twice, because then you're going to go through it all over again when doing the estimates. So you've effectively doubled the amount of time you're going to spend on it.
Well, one of the things actually that this made me think about is that is more a conversation based on value rather than actually proper time and cost. So it's like no estimation camp is driving, not having an estimate will probably bring the conversation with the stakeholders as well on a value, a specific piece of functionality, rather than actually the time spent implemented and its cost as well. But this obviously depends on a project, so on the client as well, what the client is looking to achieve, if he got a fixed budget and then he wants to achieve things for that budget, or is more actually intended to achieve a good product, good quality, or valuable product. So basically we say that there are key concepts that this no estimation camp is following. Can we just reassume them in a bit, Jake?
Yeah, so obviously the school of thought behind no estimates, they obviously go saying, you know, that there's a better way. You know, you don't have to spend all that time on something that isn't efficient. So what their methodology is, so it's still very much agile, and they do a lot of, you know, it's all the same principles you would already adhere to with an agile process, but they change it slightly. So what their methodology is, they slice the user stories thinly, as equal size as possible. Now, you could argue that actually that is a form of estimation, and you might be right, but to say roughly once something's a similar size to the other is probably a bit quicker than, you know, trying to derive specific amount of points and things like that. Plus, it also encourages smaller user stories, so you can do that delivery more iteratively. The second part is that it's time boxed and prioritized by value. So if you have a bunch of things on the backlog and they're all roughly the same size, then no longer is it questioned around, well, actually, during the sprint, if this one's bigger than this one, or it's not bigger than that one, maybe we just bring that up so we can deliver some more smaller values than one big value. Well, if they're all roughly the same size, then there's no need to have that discussion. So it's all what is the most valuable to the stakeholders, to the product owner, whoever, and that's probably a good thing. And then the third part of it is updating the forecast frequently. So instead of using finger in the air guesses or estimates, they try and base it on previous sprints or previous work done, and they use that to forecast forward. So if it was sprint based like Scrum, obviously sprint 0 you're not really going to have anything to work with, but sprint 2, sprint 3, you can then use the previous sprints and work out how many stories you did or how many features you did, and then have a velocity to forecast forward to then predict whether you're going to sort of meet the milestones or delivery dates. And that's, yeah, so it's about doing that as often as possible, because obviously as the team starts, they might start off slow, but then as they get used to the project and understand what it is more they're going to build, then it'll pick up speed. So then that forecast might potentially mean that it comes forward, but it could also change and go the other way, depending on, if you get new team members and there's a bit of time spent bringing them up to speed, that might affect velocity and things like that. But the point is, we've got something that we can forecast forward based on actual historical work, rather than a guess that someone's, I think we're going to get this much done, and we think this is how complex something is.
So
the other thing to say about that is the whole budgetary thing is different in the no estimates. They obviously we estimate predominantly to try and come up with a costing, but what they say with no estimates is, it should be a fixed delivery date based on concrete budgetary and or time constraints, not based on the estimates. So it's more about focusing it on a budget rather than on how much work there is to do and how long we think it's going to take.
Patrick, you were going to say something before I was going to say something.
No, that's all right. I was just going to say, with the splitting the user stories into kind of equal chunks,
yeah.
Do you feel like that you still kind of fall into the trap of being able to unabstract almost and relate those chunks back into time anyway? because the chunks are all the same size, you can kind of figure out how long each chunk takes and then start to derive milestones and deadlines.
Well, that's exactly that is forecasting. That is exactly that. So once you know how long things are taking and they're roughly the same size, then that is effectively a forecast. And recently in the whole Scrum, if you've done Scrum training and you're a Scrum Master, you'll know that actually there used to be a term in Scrum called commitment, where we commit to delivering stuff. Well, that terminology has changed to be we forecast this delivery, because commitment sounds too much like it's a promise and we're definitely going to do it, whereas that's not what it's about really. It's a forecast.
Satisfy your question, Patrick?
I think as long as you draw a distinction between a forecast and a deadline or a commitment, then that makes
sure.
sense.
Well, a deadline's a deadline, but a forecast is how close we are to make it. And if we think we're not going to make it, then we can have those discussions with the supplier, the client, whoever, and pivot maybe. Yeah.
And the key is keeping them involved in those discussions, isn't it?
Yep.
Making sure that everyone's expectations are in line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good one. Well, so now we know as well which might be the possible benefits of no estimation, like, for example, focusing on the value, focusing on delivery as well. So we got two views now: estimation that we covered in the beginning, which are the benefits of estimating a specific project, and which are the benefits of no estimation. I would like now to bring to this conversation one of the questions that we have been asking when we run our answer internally, when we were first thinking about having a conversation about estimation. So when actually people were asking us when we can choose within estimation and estimation. So when the estimation can apply and when actually, which are the contexts in which the estimation applies. I would like to answer this one because I won't start to answer this one because I can compare two of my experience basically. I used to work before joining Answer in a company that was producing in-house software. So in that case, we didn't need an estimation basically because the budget was already, we didn't know actually to provide the budget to a specific client because the software was produced in-house. So we just knew about the deadline, which was basically March 2020 for releasing the specific version of the software. We knew as well that there was no need actually to provide an estimation because we got this bunch of requirements, the MVP backlog, and we were just going to make it for the specific time. If there was no chance to make it, then nobody was asking how long do you take for make these requirements, because we were focusing on the value indeed of what we were putting in that release rather than actually at the time spent on putting all these things together for that release. So we were always able to deliver another piece of functionality that actually we were not able to achieve on a service pack later on after the release. When joining Answer, obviously, this is a bit changed for me because obviously we were always in contact with clients, and clients want to know about the cost, about the timescale for the project before deciding to move forward with the project delivery phase at the end of the discovery. So in that case, estimation became really, really important for me as well to get to know in the beginning about the cost and the timescale. And when I was going to the project delivery, indeed, estimation was important to compare the actual and the forecast, and to obviously prepare the sprint planning depending on the capacity of the team. So I believe that the two things with the no-estimation can fit well for in-house software company, and then the estimation one can fit well for the consultancy company. But there are also ways which, for example, in a in-house software company, I would like to provide a different method of estimation, which is not time-related, but possibly story points, because I believe that anyway, it can create confidence within the team, especially if it's a new team. What do you guys think regarding this one? Do you have any experience you want to share?
Yeah. In terms of what you were just saying, that potentially as a consultancy-based stuff, you might lean more towards estimates. I guess that is probably true most of the time. If you've got a client that you've worked with before, though, however, and you've built up trust with that customer, and they're really confident and happy with what you've delivered in the past, then you may be able to have that conversation where actually it's not about telling them how much it might cost based on our estimates, but what's your deadline, what's your budget, and what's the things that you want to build, what's the value, and then that might be something you can do from a consultancy perspective. The other scenario potentially is it depends on what you're building. So if it's like a product which is just ongoing and there is no sort of end date, you're just adding new functionality based on maybe a roadmap or requests, new requests, then again, it could fit there. So we might not do estimates for that. We might say, okay, well, if there's a budget for 12 months or 6 months or whatever, then we will build the things you would like us to build in the most value order. And it would probably fit well there as well. And then, so what, sorry, your question to us was, I've seen like I've interrupted you there, sorry.
No, it's okay actually. But I was asking indeed, what do you think when actually estimation should apply, which context and which context estimation should apply? And you're saying that it should apply as well. We can consider an estimation approach for a consultancy company as well, depending on the project, on the client, obviously on the team as well. And I think you were pointing on the fact that should be on our agile mindset to coach as well the client and providing him with a view on how, or without estimates, we can provide him with the product delivery, basically time scale as well. So you can work with that as well.
So I think, yes. Sorry, I was just going to say, similarly to Marvi, I moved from a company that made in-house software versus the company that I'm at now, which is consultancy. And I've kind of experienced the same thing, that estimates were less important when it was producing in-house software. I think on the topic of new team members as well, I think it's really beneficial if you have more junior team members to do estimation, because it provides an opportunity during delivery for people who might not feel as confident about their opinions about the work to speak up as well, and to feel justified in the amount of time they might think it would take to complete a feature, and to kind of bolster their confidence in speaking to the team and communicating.
We got a sub question actually just coming in. I want to read one because I think it's pretty much related to what we are saying right now regarding which context do we apply estimate and not estimate. This one, is it safe for business to use no estimates for newer teams where business stakeholders will have less confidence of what teams can feasibly achieve? What do you guys think of this one?
I think if it's a very junior team and it's a brand new piece of work, then chances are the team doesn't know a lot about Agile, so they're probably going to need coaching as well. So from that point of view, I would stick more to strict sort of Scrum practices, especially if you're going to do Scrum, and just do the estimates until the team are confident and happy with how the whole Agile process works, and they can start evolving that process for themselves, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think, like you were saying in the last question, it's entirely dependent on your relationship with the client and also the type of project that it is. Yeah. So I think, yeah, for a more mature team, it might work a little bit better to try and estimate.
Well, as I said before, I believe as well that for newer team, especially as I did in my in-house software company experience, we were going for some story point estimation, because I think that creates confidence in a new team, especially. So the guys are more aware of the technical skill if they provide an estimate, and then deciding if they are able to achieve that specific time, that specific things. Now they actually forecast estimated to achieve it. And also for, depending on the client, I think that for a new client as well, maybe that is, as I always work it, considering the cost and the time scale, maybe might be going for an initial estimate approach might be the right way, because obviously the team is new, the client doesn't know anything about us, so we need to create the kind of transparency and confidence with the client as well. But obviously things can be different during the project delivery than when we are going through the delivery itself, because you can always change the way in which you're approaching a project. You can always adapt actually to what will, if your method are not working for the specific moment. I just want to interrupt a second, because I want to ask the audience to scan the code in order to ask questions, because most of you are asking questions on the QI icon here in the Zoom. We are not reading that one, sorry about that. So I will try to do it by the end of the session. But we set up a Slido tool, so you can always scan this code while we are talking and asking questions on the specific Slido tool. So can we collect all of them, and if we are not answering them, we can share with you our answer afterwards. All right. Something else as well that we've been asking, sorry guys, I said that I was going to bring question here. Someone asks, what is a good point in a project to move from time estimate to story point complexity? Do you think there is a good time? I actually don't think there should be a good time, because I said we should always be able to adapt and change our approach. You can start with story point and then in time. You can start with time and then in story point.
Yeah, I think it's adopt the agile principles, as in
Absolutely.
if it works for the team and the team are being productive with it, then don't change it. If it's because if it isn't working for the team and it's causing problems, then change it up, try something new. The whole agile ethos, pivoting.
I think that's you are
That's
agreeing.
exactly what I was going to say.
All right. So we got now an overview of the estimate and an overview of the estimate, and as well how the two can survive both actually in this world, obviously depending on the project context, depending on when you actually are able to apply them. What I want to move our discussion on now is on basically on how we can manage the risk of wrong estimate, as I said in the beginning. During the discovery phase, we can provide an overall optimistic estimate for the following delivery phase. Obviously, estimation carries a lot of risk, we know, but when this happens, actually, what is going to happen in the project then? How we can mitigate this risk?
So there's a lot of ways of mitigating the risk, I guess, by trying to improve the accuracy of the estimation. So things like bringing in team members or colleagues who have expertise in subject matter of the thing that you're estimating, or running longer discovery, even having members from the client team who understand the requirements. But as we touched on earlier on, everything that you do to make those estimates more accurate comes with either a time or a money cost, or both. So I think the trick is really finding a balance between the two.
Yeah, when properly, so we can mitigate it, but when it's happened, actually, do you want to share any experience, or for example, any thoughts on the risk, what these actually wrong estimates can bring into the delivery phase?
Yeah, so I guess what is the what would happen if Discovery provided an overly optimistic estimate for the following delivery phase? In theory, what problems could that bring? Well, in the beginning of delivery, you're going to start your sprints, and you're not really going to know what the team's velocity is. So sprint 0 is probably not going to tell you a lot. But as you start delivering more sprints, so sprint 2, sprint 3, and you can build up that velocity, and you can then start forecasting, whether you think you're going to hit the milestones. But if in that scenario you realize actually you were way off camp, and the initial estimates was probably really overly optimistic, can cause issues. Now, if it's a good mature team, they'll tend to try and band together to begin with and put extra effort in and work extra hours to try and close that gap. But if that still isn't having an impact, they'll eventually burn out, and it can start to affect the team's morale, and potentially make people feel not so well, depending on how the whole project is managed and how the client is managed as well. If you've got a good scrum master, then potentially you're not going to have any issues. But if you've got a client that's quite rigid and says no, you said these dates, we're sticking to these dates, and the scope isn't changing, then it can really impact the team and make for a really difficult situation.
Yeah, obviously, I think there's as well, from a project management perspective, is also on the project manager then to obviously be as much transparent as possible with the client, and obviously advise on the risk that now this wrong estimate can impact the plan. So obviously, always coach the client in a way that the team and we all are able to adapt the plan. And moreover, try to negotiate the scope with the client, because at the moment we don't have to forget that the value of something that we are implementing is not just when we have no estimate, but also when we have estimate. So we need to make to bring that MVP to the world and try to decide as well within that, if that's the case, which are the most valuable functionality to be implemented for the first release. This is because I think that estimates, people think that estimates is used for to develop a perfect, never-changing plan, and this is a really big mistake because we don't have to think about that. We are providing estimates because we have the plan, and the plan can never change. So it's always in the agile mindset to understand that the plan can always change, and we have to adapt it to every change. That's it.
When I did the Scrum Master course, the teacher kept saying, the plan is wrong and it's going to change. Just get used to it. That's usually how agile works. The plan is wrong and it's going to change.
Yeah, it's inevitable that the estimates are going to change as you get more information as the project goes on. The key is rolling with the punches and staying agile and being able to pivot. And obviously, as you touched on a few minutes ago, the challenge there is managing the expectations with the stakeholders. And yeah, I think being transparent about it is pretty key. You have to kind of bring them on that agile journey with you. And yeah.
There was a question that I can find more, sorry, that I was going to ask, because you say something about the technical expertise of the team, Patrick. Mm-hmm. And there was someone indeed asking properly that, how do you manage to provide an estimate when the people in the team got different level of expertise in for a specific piece of functionality? You were mentioning that in the beginning, that even if we got someone actually with more expertise, junior developer, we should always try to bring the conversation together in order to understand as well which are the difficulties of a junior developer.
Well, yeah, in those situations, I think it's good to advocate those methods like you mentioned earlier, like planning poker, where the whole team gets together and they all estimate at the same time, because it empowers those junior members who normally wouldn't have the confidence to speak up, to give the reasons behind why they think that.
That's true. Because as a project manager, sometimes the junior developer actually don't feel so much confident to provide a number, to put a finger in the air or something like that. So basically, it's difficult to make them to speak sometimes, especially if they're in a new team. But so I think the planning poker one is a wise actually tool to facilitate the session, so to make them allow to provide an estimation without anyone looking at what they're saying and then uncovering all the cards and say, okay, so what do you think is just questioning about the bigger number and the smaller one, actually.
I think it's a confidence boost as well for the team to be involved in that estimation process, rather than in discovery making all those estimations, dropping them on developers that have never seen the project before and expecting them to keep up to them. I think it's a lot easier to be motivated if you were involved in deriving those numbers.
Yeah, one pitfall potentially of some of these estimation processes is they can take longer than you expect. So you have to manage that very closely, because it can soon turn into a deep dive discussion into a specific story because two people didn't quite agree, and they start talking about the reasons why they think it's bigger or smaller, and then you just need to. It can basically expose issues where you're just taking too long and you need to sort of move on. So there's a balance there if you're going to do estimates.
Yeah, you need actually to find this kind of balance that within the two actually level of expertise. All right, I think we can go just directly, because I'm just we received a lot of questions, so I think it's time to get to answer some of them.
Some questions.
Yeah, what I want just to finish to say here is that we can go on the previous one. What I was going just to say is that obviously we are not as I said in the beginning, saying you what you should do, estimate or not estimate, because estimate is never either good or bad. You do what actually is best for your team, for your project, for the particular client that you're working with. And obviously, we always rely on the agile principle that to use the techniques that works for you and to change it during the time if actually turn out to don't work anymore. So you want actually to improve always your way of delivering software. So you're just going to change it. So you can try all of them. All right. So do you consider confidence in estimation? For example, an estimate of 2 days with a 50% of confidence being the variance between 1 day, 50% smaller, and 3 days, 50% larger. Do you guys, as developer, have ever actually provided this kind of estimate?
I use the term confidence a lot, but not necessarily in the estimation process. But when it's coming to the milestones, I might ask the team if they're still feeling confident and how, yeah, are you still feeling confident that you will deliver, that we're thinking we're going to deliver before the milestone? Or if not, what concerns have you got? Because that's a good way of finding out if there are any concerns, because sometimes maybe they don't necessarily get brought up as well. But yeah, in terms of, I've not really done it as part of the estimation process, but I do try to use confidence when asking the team if we think we're on track.
Yeah, I personally use the confidence question when I set up the sprint. We set up as a team the sprint goal, and I ask, is everyone confident on achieving that one? But I never use it for estimate, because obviously we are always asking to provide a kind of accurate estimate, assuming the risk that it can be as accurate as it will be then when we are going to work on it, because of an expected incident happening to the implementation. Otherwise, if we didn't have this kind of risk, actually, we were not here talking about software implementation. We were talking about maybe construction management, something else, to be honest.
The other thing I would say to that question is, well, I typically try to avoid any type of estimation which has days in it, which is specifying time intervals, because it's too tightly coupled to resource and how much resource you've got to fulfill a sprint, for example. If you're using days, they fit too tightly, when actually we want to focus on if it's how complex something is. So I would rather use the sort of historical data to determine a forecast rather than sort of estimating days.
Yeah, I think using those kind of abstracted methods of estimation that don't involve time kind of remove the importance of having a confidence like that, because you're already making it a little bit more of a rough or like a broad stroke estimation. You don't really need a range if you're estimating in points, or especially if you're estimating in big or small or medium, it becomes less important.
All right, then we go. I hope we satisfy actually your question. If you're looking at cycle time, lead time relative to complexity, does that not inherently tie you to time estimates, whether intended or not? What do you think about that?
I don't think so, because cycle time and lead time relative to complexity is, again, more about forecasting, not estimating. Estimating is something, it's like a gut feeling based on experience and things like that, whereas actually what we're saying is, I've got this historical data of the last couple of sprints that I've got a rough idea of how long it's taken to complete stories of a specific complexity. So that's the whole point of the cycle time and the lead time, to try and help with the forecast rather than to estimate, I think. At least that's how I see it. I don't know if I've read that wrong.
That's the only time element that it links you to is a deadline, really, is how many cycles are there left before the work is completed. But it takes some of the pressure off the development team of having those estimates at a more granular level on the stories.
Yeah,
it's at a higher level, like a sprint level for cycle time.
All right. We already answered the third one, actually, which is a good point in project to move from estimate. There is another one. Now that you're speaking about time, I can see there is this one. How do you tackle avoiding time when you're in a digital agency where clients are billed a sign-off project based on a cost of hours? This actually relates to what we said before as well. That, for example, I was making the example, talking about my experience, I was saying that in a digital consultancy, I would be more confident in providing an estimate, because obviously we bill our client and they accept projects to move on with the project, because we provide them with a commercial overview and with a roadmap. So, but of course, Jake was actually pointing out that you can always teach and coach your client in thinking about the value rather than actually the cost of agreeing on the cost of a project. So if the client doesn't have a fixed budget and can actually, it's not likely to happen in this situation, but if the client actually doesn't mind about the budget and would like to see MVP deliver it, then you're working out the value rather than actually the cost of a specific project. Do you want to add something else, guys?
Well, I would say typically there's something going to be fixed, isn't there? And that might be budget, it might be time, or it might be scope, but you can't really fix more than one of those things.
Yeah.
otherwise you're leading to issues.
This is the
So-
PM Agile triangle in this.
Yeah.
You can fix the three of them: scope, time, and cost. Obviously, you always have to negotiate. And
So I think how are you avoiding time? You're not really avoiding time because you're still going to bill for the hours that have been worked.
Yeah.
So are you avoiding time? Not really, because we're still forecasting when we think we're going to be done with the delivery, and we're basing it on the team that we've got. And if the forecast is that we're actually falling short, then we could consider bringing someone else on, and then obviously the number of hours would change. Or if we feel like we're actually ahead of time, then we might not need a person, so the hours could come down. I guess you do it that way.
I think it ties in with the client relationship as well. I think in an agency, there's quite a lot of times where you'll do one project with a client and then you won't do it anymore. I think it's a lot of a harder sell to do that kind of no estimates type of project with a brand new client than it would be with one that you've done a few projects with before. You've already established that trust. You might even be using a similar team and they have the confidence that you can kind of coach them through that.
Then I think this is for me slightly off topic, but what are your thoughts on managing developers' performance based on their estimate or bad estimate? To be honest, I don't judge the performance of a developer based on the estimate that they give me, because I know software development and I know that anything unexpected can happen, even for a really experienced developer with 10 years of experience or more. And if you provide me an estimate and I'm going to communicate to a client that, look, for doing this, we need this kind of this time and this specific budget, and then when going through the implementation, things are changing, it can happen. So as I said, I would prefer to manage the risk, to mitigate the risk and negotiate with the client rather than actually judging the performance of a developer.
I guess it does link in a little bit to how estimates might be viewed by the client or the stakeholders, because if there's a lot of pressure being put on the team because the estimates aren't being met, what can happen is you might not intend it to happen, but the team might then overcompensate and make their estimates bigger than they would have normally.
Exactly.
because of all the extra pressure that's coming back from not meeting their original estimates.
Yeah.
So you need to be careful with that.
I agree with that.
It can have the wrong effect.
So I agree with that. Judging a developer based on the estimate that he provides or she provides, can create a lot of pressure within the team as well. While rather instead, I would like to promote a conversation with the different developer when it's in the case of providing an estimate, rather than just asking to one developer, because it might be something during the conversation. Different people can come up with the solution that nobody told before, or with risk that nobody thought about. So I don't judge developer performance based on bet on good estimates.
Yeah, on top of what you guys said, I don't think the time taken to complete a feature is a good metric to measure a developer's performance anyway. It doesn't really have any implication on the code quality, and there's so many more things that you could go into if you have concerns about a developer's performance that you can speak to them about, rather than just going by how much time they've logged versus how much time they have estimated.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's completely unrelated.
I think we have time to answer the last one, because then we have
there's a couple of others in there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, we can always have the same percent. Yeah, a lot. Well, good for us, to be honest. It means that it was a really interesting conversation.
So what about that one there with no estimates? How do you coordinate and plan with non-technical teams?
And this one was directed to you, Jake, because it was asked in the Q&A chat by Phil Bottomley.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Phil. Anyway, so Jake, this is for you. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, with no estimates, how do you coordinate and plan with non-technical teams such as trainers, comms, and how would you recommend a form of estimates to enable planning? Well, if it depends really, because there's delivery of when the feature will be complete, but that is separate to any training and stuff like that. And of course, that is maybe sometimes often forgotten about during delivery, because actually there might be a process put in place to roll certain features out, and it isn't necessarily going to be the developers that are charged with that. So as long as you've got a sort of roadmap in place, then and you're confident you're going to meet those deadlines and you're forecasting, then you can keep going back to those teams and saying, well, we're still on track for, we think, this date, we're forecasting this. So, and we'll keep updating you on that forecast just in case that changes, but that should give you enough information or time to start planning, your rollout of those features, or any training that needs to be put together, all those sort of non-development activities. That is assuming that your development team doesn't include these people as well that do the training, because development team can include many different types of people. So if that's part of your delivery, that you do planning material, training material as well, then that's different. But in the teams I've worked in, typically it's usually somebody else that deals with that. Especially in healthcare, like they usually have teams dedicated to that.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to get back on that actually when we are going to send the answer in email format, because it's a really interesting one indeed. We don't have time now to finish to answer all the others, so just want to give you a few takeaway from this event. So we covered the estimation, no estimation debate, I said. We reported some of the benefits as well that you might encounter when you are going for an estimation approach and no estimation approach. So estimates can help determine decisions, we said. It is always important to understand the reason why we are estimating. So asking why a specific client would like to know a specific estimate, maybe because it can help the specific client to decide within the delivery of a determined product or project. Obviously, as said, we always say during the conversation is that estimates help a team to communicate, and is really important because allows transparency as well within the team, as well within the client, because obviously we introduce our client every time, sometimes that we got about a finance session. The product owner from client side is always there, so there is a certain level of transparency within everyone involved in the project. Allow for failing yearly as well, and this is something in common with the no estimate process as well, because you can recognize in an agile project or any other project as well, whenever you are going, everything is going wrong. So you set up a specific time to focus on what actually worked, what didn't work in your previous week, in your previous days, and you can decide to adapt, I said, your approach to what you are doing. So you can fail early in order to basically adapt early and trying to improve early your process and your approach. Regarding the no estimates benefit as well, we say that obviously stakeholders can focus on the value rather than actually on the cost and time scale of a project. Focusing on value as well is a really important aspect, I think, of no estimate projects, because people are basically more intended to provide a most valuable product actually, rather than thinking about how much it will cost for us. And as well, the team itself is focusing on the delivery rather than actually what the no estimate camp thinks, spending time in a long session about the estimation. Anything else you would like to add, guys? We've got 2 minutes. No.
I guess just that third point, being the same on both, is so important.
Yeah.
If you start off using one method and it's not working, if it doesn't work for the team, then you've got to try something different, and it's going to be different every single time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, so it's just stick to the agile principles, really. If it's not working, try something else. Obviously, with no estimates, it might be a little bit different for that, because you have to get the client on board too, or the customer. But yeah, typically it's what works best for the project, what works best for the team.
Exactly.
So agile, estimates or no estimates, both can work and both can deliver great software.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Any feedback, you can find contact on the Answer Digital website, but also sharing any comment, any feedback or any other question to the slido.com app. And we'll try to provide the recording of the session and as well all the other answers that you would like to hear from us. Thank you for attending. Thank you to the panelists as well, and to our man behind the scene. that actually helped us with the presentation. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.